Hi and welcome to another episode of Willys Garage Norway. If you have followed my social media, Instagram and Facebook, you already know that I am in the process of moving to a new workshop at my new house. If you haven't followed my social media, links are down below. I'm going to use the garage at my new house as a workshop, and in this video I'm going to show you the process of the insulation and the plating job in the new workshop. Here you see the walls before I started doing anything. One of these walls was already insulated and covered by panel boards. To plate the walls and roof after installation, I got a good deal on some second-hand 15mm OSB plates. These plates happened to be the original Sterling OSB plates. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. The struts in the walls allowed 150mm of insulation. I got some leftover 100mm rock wool insulation for free, and I bought a bunch of Glava 50mm insulation to combine them and get the 150mm I needed. Remember, I live in Norway. Winter, cold, insulation, good. The miter saw got a new stand. I needed some more struts to get the walls prepared for the wind and moist barriers and the OSB plates. I got hold of some 36x48mm and 48x198mm construction timber. That's approximately 1.5 x 2 inches and 2.8 inches. I also needed a lot of screws, tape, wind and moist barriers and other accessories. The corners also needed struts for the plating. The outside of the struts are plated with something we call CA plasterboards. These are wind barriers, but most of them had some kind of damage on the lower parts, so I decided to use some wind barrier tape and cloth to seal them before placing the insulation. The best solution here would have been to take off all the boards on the outside of the garage and wrap it in new barriers, but that's a lot of work and I will have to wait to do that another day. Because of the height of the OSB plates, there was going to be a small gap between the floor and the plates. That's why I had to cut some construction timber length to cover those gaps. And after all the construction was done, there was time to start with the insulation job. Oh, what a fun job that is. Not. I filled all the gaps that was possible to fill before placing the big plates of insulation between the struts. Some places in the corners and around the windows I needed to cut the insulation plates to size using a handy insulation knife. When placing the insulation, you need to be careful that you don't squeeze it. It should have an exact fit to preserve the insulation value. And I think it's funny and very impressive how much the manufacturer is able to squeeze inside one of these packages. Here is the state of the garage after insulating the walls. Now it was time for the moist barrier on the inside of the walls. This is needed to prevent the moisture from the inside of the workshop to get into the insulation and walls, mostly in the wintertime, to prevent condensation. I measured the length of the whole wall before rolling it out on the floor to cut it correctly. After that, I started in one corner using a staple gun and attached it all around the walls. After the moisture barrier was installed, it was time to start plating the walls with the OSB plates. I used a jigsaw to cut the plates to size so they would line up with the struts in the walls. I used wood glue in the tongue and groove of the OSB plates to get a better seal and joint. And it's always a good feeling when the cut out fits. Victory! With the walls finished, insulated and plated, it was time to start with the ceiling. First off, I cut some small brackets that I used to attach the insect barriers towards the opening of the lower part of the roof. These openings are going to be used as ventilation on top of the insulation to prevent any moist and condensation, and therefore to prevent mold. There was 26 of these openings between the roof frames, and therefore I needed to cut and attach 52 pieces of these. The insect barrier was cut to size and attached with a staple gun. Then I needed to continue those brackets up along the roof over the height of the insulation I was installing. This was to get the wind barrier attached from the openings on the lower parts of the sides and up over the insulation. I also needed 52 of these pieces cut with an angle towards the small brackets. When all 52 pieces was properly attached, it was time to install the wind barrier. I cut all the pieces I needed from a big roll of barrier material. I used a nail gun to mount them in place and then used a heavy-duty wind barrier tape to seal the edges of the fabric to the wood. The mechanisms for both old garage doors had to be dismantled for me to get access to the whole ceiling for the insulation job. I want to have the possibility to inspect the roof, construction and insulation after I am finished. Therefore I made a walkway on top of the ceiling struts for me to crawl on. This walkway is going to be accessed through a hatch on the outside of the garage. When that was done, it was time to start the ceiling insulation job. Here I had opted to use 200mm insulation just because I had the space to do it. And again, I live in Norway, winter, cold, insulation, good. To be able to put the sheets of 200mm insulation between the ceiling struts without they falling down, I started to attach the moist barrier on the struts with a staple gun. This way the insulation could rest on top of the plastic. I cut an angle in the edge piece to match the angle of the roof so the insulation sheets would fit snugly against the wind barrier I had previously installed. I did this on both sides and in the end I put the middle sheets in place, securing it all with more moist barrier plastic. After cutting off the excess moist barrier, all the joints and holes was sealed off with some heavy-duty moist barrier tape. Now it was time to start plating the roof with OSB, and I used this handy plate lift to be able to do this job alone. The OSB plates are very heavy, so that lift was a lifesaver. I used a lot of screws to be sure that the plates was securely attached to the ceiling. I figured out that the joints in the plates was a bit rough. Some scraping of the excess wood chips made it a lot easier for me to join them together, although it still was quite a struggle to get them properly together. Eventually I learned a trick to use some scrap wood pieces to align the plates to each other, making the job a bit easier. Now it's beginning to look like a warm and cozy workshop. Even in the coldest of Norwegian winters, with icy winds blowing sounds around the corners outside, snowflakes falling silently on the roof, and frosty fog generated from a breath of fresh air. Especially if I install a heavy-duty heater of some kind. Because, believe you me, winter is coming in Norway. Yeah, okay, that was it for this episode of Willys Garage Norway. I hope you like these kinds of updates. I'm going to try to keep you updated on the new workshop progress. Links down below to my social media if you want. Subscribe, like or dislike this video. And until next time, thanks for watching.